Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment, a podcast devoted to helping you overcome challenges in your life that prevent you from becoming the best version of yourself. Each episode features interviews with people from all walks of life about their journey of self-development and the principles they utilize to overcome their fears to achieve their desired outcome. Ready to be enlightened? Here's your host, Ken Primus.
Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, guys, you know I like to honor our guests because I know they're coming with a couple of things I deem expensive. Time, 24 hours given to every man and woman. How we utilize time, how we honor time, how we respect time will tell me much about you. The other is the journey. The journey is a powerful creator. It created Dean and it deposited a couple of things inside of him. And so we want access to that. And we want to honor him to coming and sharing all of these things. What did that journey deposit into Dean? Knowledge, wisdom, insights, all of these wonderful things. And we want access to it. And he's here to offer it to us all. And we thank him for it. Dean, thank you so much for coming.
Ken, I'm delighted to be here. I'm grateful for the opportunity to chat with you.
Excellent. As I mentioned, I believe that you and I are on this planet, we are afforded the opportunity to go on a couple of things, processes within the framework of quote unquote personal development. The first is an introduction to self, because we don't know personally who we are, because we've been told by mom and dad and grandmother and everyone else, whatever, who we are. And we have to go on that journey. But there's a part of that journey, the independent part of it, but there's the interdependent part of it also, Dean. And my question to you is based on that aspect. How do you serve mankind?
Principally, I serve mankind by exploring myself. And by virtue of exploring myself, allow myself to be more of my authentic self by its nature demands, or is the basic function of unity or oneness. And so consequently, by serving myself, I serve all. How one serves oneself is the fulfillment of our purpose. And there's no one in all of creation that has a different purpose. That purpose is to explore ourselves. And that is distinguishable from our mission in a particular incarnation. Our mission is to do what we like. And by virtue of discovering what it is that we like, pursuing that, becoming proficient at that, it provides us with the opportunity for experiences to fulfill our purpose. And so consequently, if, choose to be, you like being a lawyer, you like being a bricklayer, you like being whatever chosen focus of activity for an incarnation, you become magnetic and you attract to you the types of experiences that will afford you the opportunity to further explore yourself and thereby fulfill your purpose.
I think that is the key. Absolutely, Dean. That's the process. I remember one of the principles that I read in the Bible was to love your neighbor as you love yourself. So the assignment is to love yourself, and as that relationship out of learning who you are, it assists you. It adjusts your compass. If I can be patient with me, and I'm Dean, I'm a tough one, man. If I
Tough
can
on
be
yourself?
patient, if I can be patient with me, if I can be kind to me, sure, I can be kind to you, because I've learned a few things. It's empathy and all the different things, and patience. Those things are important because it helps to build a relationship with self. Because most of us want it to be done right away. You know how skilled we are. It takes us a little while to get it all done, because most of us are stubborn.
Well, it's a process.
Yeah,
And you have to understand that it's a process. And if you understand how we are consciousness, everything that we experience is consciousness. And if you understand how consciousness learns, we learn by the process of analogy. And so we are obligated to have experiences, most of which initially we don't like. And so consequently, we're narrowing our perceptions of self and what we like by virtue of learning what we don't like, so that we will know what we do like when we encounter it. And we are all motivated to get more of what we like, but that perception of what we like is constantly being refined by virtue of the nature of the experiences that we have.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. One of our things that we do, Dean, I tell people go back to the beginnings of our beginnings, our creation, and if you will. I mean, we visit a couple of spaces as we move through our life, walking towards quote unquote adulthood. And one of those very first spaces that we linger for a few years is with a group of people that are called a family. Mom and dad are there. Um, we have brothers and sisters, some of us. The grouping basically are a group of strangers. But yet, in this group of strangers, we're going to learn a couple of things that are very, very important. Communication skills. We're going to learn about love. We're going to learn about emotional things, the modus operandus, if you will, by which we are now going to move through our life. What was your family unit like?
Well, my family unit was a combination of stability and chaos. I was an only child and raised essentially by a single mother. My father was detached and suffered from alcoholism most of his life, and so there was a lot of chaos there. And my mother, at a relatively my early age, decided that environment was not conducive to my learning and development. And so my parents split when I was roughly 12. And so from the age of that family dynamic of chaos up until about the age of 12. And then after that, a more stable environment, however stressful, became more of a learning opportunity that allowed me to gain some perspectives at an early age and served as the foundation for adulthood.
Yeah, Dean, what were some of those perspectives that you learned as a learning early age? Because being in a cauldron, if you will, of all of those emotions and with your dad and his struggles and so forth, and your mom with her foresight and her bravery to do what she did. How did this young man manage himself? What was he like in there? Because some of us, I know, in conversation, I've talked to people, bitterness, anger, all those different things began to show up and began to manifest. How did you handle all of that as a young individual?
Well, what the transition afforded me was the opportunity to assume responsibilities of an adult nature much younger than my peers. And so consequently, while it wasn't from a perspective of awareness that this necessity of behavioral responsibility emerged, it was just more or less a natural occurrence that
Mhm.
you recognize the necessity of assuming a degree of responsibility that your peers did not have, and you don't really think about it, you just do it. But it allowed me to begin the seeds of critical thinking, which developed at more significantly as I matured into adulthood. Again, we learn by analogy, we learn by
Mhm.
comparison and contrast. And so, there was, is the very nature of our teenage years chaotic because we have escalated awareness post puberty, but we have no information. And so we're still gaining tremendous amount of information in a short period of time to try to fill that void that is left by the escalated awareness. In retrospect, this is all retrospect. There's
Yeah,
nothing that
yeah.
is apparent while we're going through it, but it became a significant foundation for my capacity to become more self-aware.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I do this, Dean, is to go back because I think, for me, it was the beginning of my beginnings. It formed me. Some things happened there that formed me and caused me to adapt a way of thinking that walked with me through most of my life until I had to sit down and deal with some of those decisions that I made as a young man that were manifesting and causing a little angst as I got a little older. I saw that it served me for a while, and those while we go into I call the survival mode. It'll you survive, and then you figure your way out as you get older and so forth. When you're going and moving through life, the responsibility as a young man again with a single mom and the critical thinking skills at such a young age, I tell people those things are beautiful tools, but to be ushered into that because of one's lifestyle with dad and the mom and so forth, to be in that space at that age is kind of a gift in a way. I tell people, when you look back at some of the things, because we see that it really served us as individuals as we're moving through. You're heading into college, Dean. What field of study did you pick, and why did you pick that field?
Well, as most college students, I began with one great ambition, and that transformed dramatically while I was in college. I began with the ambition of going into medicine. So you could say that I was in pre-med, and once getting into my academic studies, it dawned on me that I loved chemistry, but I didn't really like biology at all. And so consequently, that would make it difficult to pursue medicine if you didn't like biology. So I tottered across to the opposite side of campus and majored and minored in psychology, philosophy, and English literature primarily. Philosophy and psychology were my loves once having been introduced to that concept, and through the course of undergraduate and graduate studies became thoroughly disenchanted with what academia knew, what the foundations of their belief were. And after finishing my academic period, I gave all that up and became competitive in the business world until roughly my 50th year. And in my 50th year, utilizing that feature of learning to be critical in my thinking, had what is often referred to as an awakening. And an awakening is nothing more than that realization that all the stuff you've been doing in your life may be providing you with the accoutrements of conventional success, but it's not making you happy. And so consequently, that realization motivated me to search elsewhere to find the fulfillment that I was really needing and seeking in my lifetime.
Yeah.
I lost your voice, Ken.
The subconscious being is not interested in the job as much as the conscious being is. And so we can accumulate as many things that we want, Dean, much wealth, because we see millionaires and multimillionaires that commit suicide. Something was lacking, yet they got everything that we were told should have made them extremely happy. And yet that individual, that subconscious individual, was not happy. And so we have to learn. And the journey, I tell people, is to make us aware, to become acquainted, if you will, with that individual that it resides there, because we've done everything they say, and we did the study. We went into corporate America. We make our money. We do everything. And yet when the curtain is come down and you're by yourself, the pain and the longing is there. And then the investigation begins. And I call that place, as you and I talked about earlier, that's enlightenment, that place right there when you now begin to seek data to become a better individual, to become acquainted with who's calling, which is actually you calling onto you, deep calling onto deep, as they say. So when 50 years, you're a late bloomer, Dean, when you think about it. Most of us, we try to make it somewhere in our 30s and 40s,
Yeah, most people never
Yeah.
have that moment of awakening.
I agree. I've said that so many times. I worked in a skilled nursing facility and I've met hundreds and thousands of them that were never woke up at all and were satisfied. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you're satisfied, then the journey is not
satisfaction is a relative term.
Yeah. And for what it was, some of the phenomena that I ran into, Dean, was I did it for the kids, I did it for everyone, but they never did anything for them. And it's really fascinating, that piece, when you get to that far in life and realize that nothing had been done for self. So here you are at 50.
Well, we realize we've been living vicariously through others rather than pursuing what our purpose is.
Exactly. How meditation, because I tell people that's what saved my life. It was meditation. I was introduced to meditation through books. I began to inquire knowledge as I began to study more about the subconscious being and the soul of man, as they say. Talk to me as to what ushered you to obtain or seek the tool of meditation in your life.
Well, actually, what motivated me to begin to meditate was, first of all, this realization that I was not happy, but also my spouse at the time suffered from a condition called cluster headaches for most of
Mhm.
her life. And she had learned to contend with the cycles of cluster headaches and until they became chronic, which is not an uncommon occurrence. And rather than being an annual or biannual experience over her lifetime that she could manage, when they became chronic, it was constant pain. It was constant fear of a
Mm.
reoccurrence of the cluster headache. And so we began a process of investigating medical treatments. We went to there are two primary clinics in the United States that focus on cluster headaches, and they virtually had the same treatments, which was essentially a severing of the trigeminal nerve, which was an artificial stroke in its effect. And so we ruled that as the least desirable avenues. And we began the investigation of non-medicine processes, different techniques identified as emotional processing that I now promote as a precursor to improving your meditation.
Yeah.
And we had great success with these emotion processing techniques in conjunction with the meditation. And if you understand that enlightenment is not a destination, it is a process. And we are all enlightened to the degree that we have allowed ourselves to become enlightened. And so consequently, there's no one that is not on the enlightenment path, and that is synonymous with the evolution of consciousness. And at our range of consciousness, we exist within a range of consciousness, all of us that are listening to this and you and I that are speaking. And one of the essential elements of our experience is we are designed to create, from the moment that we are born, a hierophant, a false identity, an ego. It's all the same thing, just different words. This becomes our perception of self, and it is our tool for learning. And we constantly modify this hierophant with every thought that we process. The effort is to get more of what we like. And so if I modify my hierophant, my perception of self, even on a situational basis, I'm doing so in order to try to trick you being anything outside of me, to give
Yeah.
me more of what I like, which keeps us on an immediate gratification basis. In addition to that, also causes us to fulfill that behavior of Sisyphusian behavior, that every day we're compelled to push that rock up to the top of the mountain, knowing that it's going to roll back down the next day. And so it becomes our constant source of stress. Stress is anything that we don't like. Anything that you experience that you don't like in and of itself is stress. Stress by its very nature is a spectrum. So there are some things that, we don't like, but it's inconsequential. We have other experiences that we deem to be traumatic. But all of these experiences that we don't like because it confronts the authenticity of our hierophant. The hierophant is predicated upon the perception of our autonomy, of our independence from other people and from the Creator itself. And so the very nature of our range of consciousness is predicated on a very intense, very high degree of the perception of separation and autonomy of self. The entire process of consciousness evolution, of enlightenment, is the surrendering of this perception of self.
Mm-hmm.
The authenticity of our autonomy becomes questionable. In order to achieve that, it's a two-step process. One is to heal what I identify as emotional baggage. Emotional baggage is nothing more than all of the lessons, all of the messages that have been brought to us over the course of our lifetime by virtue of our experiences that we did not learn at the time. Every experience that we have had is bringing us a message about us that we are tasked with becoming aware of and surrendering those aspects of our hierophant, of our perception of self, that don't serve us, no longer serve us. And that is a progressive process. And so the pursuit of the enlightenment path requires, first of all, that we heal this emotional baggage which is the source of all of the mental and emotional illnesses that we create, and so consequently the physical illnesses as well. But simultaneous with that and concurrent with that are all of the beliefs that we've incorporated into this hierophant. And so as the healing process progresses, as we assume responsibility for ourselves by virtue of this awakening and pursue the evolution of our consciousness perspective, we begin to heal the emotional baggage by virtue of awareness. That is our tool for discovery and healing. But we also become aware of the beliefs that we've incorporated into this hierophant. And as we recognize them, we let them go because they no longer serve us. These become the perpetual source of the stress that we experience on a day-to-day basis. And if you understand that bliss is our natural state of being, but bliss is perfect happiness, the lack of happiness is stress. And so as we surrender, as we heal the emotional baggage, as we surrender our erroneous perceptions that we've incorporated into our false identity, into our hierophant, then we experience less stress. And happiness is like water flowing into a void. Happiness flows into the void that is left by virtue of the lessened stress. And it's not something that we get. It's not something that we give. It is something that we are. And so consequently, we experience greater happiness by virtue of reducing the stress that we perpetuate by virtue of this hierophant that we create.
Absolutely. I couldn't have explained that any clearer. I always try to invite the audience that everyone starts by listening. I tell them to learn to transition to hear. Because when you hear things, it really is, I think it engages the subconscious mind within that conversation where you're just not listening here, you're going deeper and extracting what was said. And I want to encourage you guys to go back in and rewind that session, that piece, because what Dean did and explained is some powerful things about you and I and the journey and the purpose of all of those things. And so I invite you to go back in and play that again. Dean, talk to me about once you made the entrance of all of these tools, you brought in meditation and stuff that you talked about, some of the results that what began to happen to you? Because before that, you'd mentioned where you had accumulated all of these things, but yet there was something missing. What began to happen to you, if you will, as you began to bring in these additional tools into your life?
Well, behaviorally, you begin to surrender. You begin to surrender things. You begin to become more aware of things around you, but primarily you become more aware of yourself. And as you transform yourself by surrendering these false perceptions that you've incorporated into this hierophant, into this false identity, then the nature of your relationships change almost immediately. We learn by virtue of analogy, but we observe others that we deem to be happier than we are. And we begin to, it is our design that we will begin to mimic the behavior of those people that we recognize or we believe are happier than we are until we become that level of awareness, that level of consciousness of those people that we observe. Now, we make a lot of mistakes. We observe in someone that we deem to be happier than we are, and we begin to mimic them, and we realize that that's not really happiness. So we discard that object, and we seek another individual, hopefully more substantial than what we had previously done. But this is the same basis that advertisers and public relations firms use. It's called engineered consent. And we observe when you see a car company advertising their product, you never see someone, you don't see just the car. You always see a happy person in that car or a happy family in that car. And the message is, if you buy my car, then you'll be just as happy as this person that we're showing in our advertising. And of course, you buy a car and you're really excited about it. And that's my car. And then 6 months later, it's just, oh yeah, that's my car. Because it will fail to give you the happiness that you were promised by the advertising. And the same is true of how we observe behavior in other people. When
Mhm.
we work towards whatever we have identified with this individual that is transitory, proves unfulfilling in making us more happy. And so we keep narrowing down by virtue of our emulant choices what is actually providing us with greater happiness. Meditation is an invaluable tool for healing and achieving the process successes that I identified just earlier with the emotional baggage healing and the
Yeah.
awareness and surrendering of the erroneous beliefs that we've incorporated into our identity. The emotional baggage or the emotional processing methods I use in my mental health practice every day to help people expeditiously heal traumas and those manifestations of their false beliefs that prepare them to meditate and to go deeper into meditation, because what people don't realize is it requires more energy to sit in silence than it does to
Mhm.
be active.
Yeah.
And so someone who is active all the time and can't sit still is demonstrating their lack of energy,
Mhm.
their lack of self-awareness, their lack of control over their mind, body, spirit. And so consequently, healing the emotional baggage liberates the energy necessary in order to take control of your mind, to take control of your body functions and requirements, and allows you to sit in silence and extend that sitting in silence in order to do more work in healing the false perceptions of self that we've accumulated.
Yeah. Again, I remember when I was busy in corporate America, chasing everything like they told me I need to be chasing. And I was the director of the organization at the time. And my world was spinning, single dad with my 4 boys. My world was all upside down. And I am trying to finances because I was upside down.
Mm-hmm.
And when I quote unquote stumble into, we always like to say, stumble onto meditation, I began to control my entire life, sitting down in the morning, meditating. And first, of course, it was difficult. My mind was all over the place. I'd hear, did I forget to turn the light on, off? The refrigerator's buzzing. I mean, all kinds of crazy thoughts will come into your mind. And I would tell people that's where I learned choice, the power of choosing was sitting in my meditation, where I would say to a thought that comes, and it comes all over the place, I do not give you permission at this time, rest. And as I learned to rest my mind, where I couldn't sit for 30 seconds, I can meditate for an hour and change and not even feel anything like, the time is
Well,
gone or
time
anything.
becomes irrelevant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's not a
so,
matter of sitting for an hour and change. It's
yeah,
just I'm here and time is going on, but I'm not
yeah.
constrained by that.
Not even aware of all of that, and realize when I woke up and moved, that's when I'm like, oh, it's an hour. It's been an hour and change. And so I want to encourage you guys. It is a powerful place to gain insight into you and tap into who you truly are. It is one of the most powerful tools available to mankind to deal with healing and pain. You talked, and I can surmise that some of the language and the things you were talking about was in your first book, The Identity Model, about healing and stuff like that. Talk to us. I wanted to go in a little more, Dina, on your second book about edifying children of the lesser God, if you will. It is the title of his book. And guys, we're going to provide everything for you to get into Dean's world, to get these books. Why? Because you know what I say to you and how I've been saying it from day one in this channel, that within those walls that we call in the books house wisdom. I was rescued out of my pain from many books as I opened those walls, but I came prepared. I came with my being ready to receive. And when I did, I received, and it changed the trajectory of my life. Talk to us about the children of the lesser God, about the premise behind that, and what was some of the insights that you obtained while you were in that space to produce that documentation.
The books that I've written are essentially a progression reflective of my own transformation. But in order to be successful in our surrendering of this hierophant and escalating our awareness, it's necessary to have information. And again, it is by design that our range of consciousness that we experience, that information is provided to us in increments as we are ready to receive it. A major consideration, this whole process, there is a significant point of, I hate to use the word achievement, but I can't think of another word for it, achievement in our enlightenment process, when the authenticity of our hierophant, of our perception of self, kind of crosses over the peak, and we begin the downward journey, not accelerating, but lessening the authenticity of our hierophant, the authenticity of our. And that point is the point of realization that we are the one infinite creator experiencing ourself at this range of consciousness. And that is not an intellectual decision. You can make that intellectual decision today, but it is a feeling. It is a heartfelt recognition, and it is tremendously humbling. People who have not made that decision perceive that to be, well, that's way too bold for me to make that decision. But you feel that. And when you feel that, you feel a tremendous sense of humility that you are fulfilling a very valuable purpose to serve the one infinite creator by virtue of the work that you're doing on yourself. And so consequently, what I have tried to do in that book, Edifying Children of a Lesser God, is really the foundational perspectives that give you a broader perspective of the truth of our existence, but still moderate enough that it's not going to cause you to pull your hair out or anything of that nature.
Yeah.
And by transforming that perspective of the religious concept of a God, the concept of a God requires that there be a God and that there be you. In other words, that there is a dramatic foundational separation between the two of you, which is erroneous. All is one. The law of one is the one immutable truth in all of creation. There is no aspect of creation that is not the one infinite creator, which includes you. The very nature of perceiving God as being infinite dictates that that includes you, because the only concept of infinity is everything. And so consequently, when you allow that to sink in and allow yourself to really feel that, is when you can consciously but enthusiastically begin to assume that awareness of your task being that self-exploration and surrendering those perceptions that perpetuate your separation from the one infinite creator, allowing yourself to acknowledge that this is just as valuable a role as the highest levels of consciousness, because you're exploring what you have available to you at this range of consciousness.
Love it, Dean. And again, guys, just listen to and learn to hear what he's talking about, because it is really powerful, impactful, and it will change your life. Talk to us a little. I know the newest book that you have, the Enigma of the Consciousness. But I want to go back into a little thing that you had mentioned and we hadn't really delved into, but many people, Dean, are struggling with mental health issues. We see that when COVID came on the scene, it exposed a tremendous need for help that was hidden within our society. And we are now moving through, we came through COVID, but that need was exposed, but it's still there. I remember looking at the data, because I came out of healthcare, looking at the data and seeing the increase and so forth. Speak to that topic, that issue, if you will, for those, Dean, that are in that space of confusion, if you will, as to themselves, their families, the world around them. And how can you assist that individual? We invite them to seek help and so forth. And Dean is an expert in that field, and we'll provide everything for you guys to get access to him. But speak to them a little here, Dean, as to encouraging, if you will, some encouraging word for someone who's going through those things and battling with their thoughts and has been labeled, quote unquote, mental issues.
Well, the effects that I have seen and that I've read about of COVID was the required isolation that people felt. to the separation from their normal expected activities and interactions with other people. We learn by virtue of our experiences, and we learn, we perceive that we can learn about the world around us, but the reality is we can only learn about ourselves in relation to people, places, and things, because we are all that we can feel. I can't feel what you're feeling. You can't feel what I am feeling. We can establish a harmonic resonance with someone, for example, that is experiencing grief, and someone that's close to us, and then we perceive that we can feel what they're feeling, which is not the case. We are feeling that feeling within us. It is our harmonic resonance with their low level of vibration that we are feeling, which in and of itself is a message to us of what we need to become aware of and heal within ourselves. That feeling of isolation disrupted our capacity to reinforce this hierophant that we have created, because it didn't have that social interaction that we perceived that we required in order to sustain our hierophant. Again, the hierophant is created for the sole purpose of getting more of what we like. Socially, that's considered to be a love interaction. But the irony of that love interaction, that we perceive we're getting love or that we're giving love, either way, we're treating love as a commodity. And love is not a commodity. It is an inherent characteristic of the one infinite creator, and we are the one infinite creator at this range of consciousness. So that love and awareness is an inherent part of us. Every time that we have felt love in our lives, it's not because we've gotten anything from anybody or anything. It is because that person or that situation that we were in at the time gave us permission, because we felt comfortable enough in that situation that we temporarily surrendered the authenticity of our hierophant. And so we were feeling the love that we already are. Now, with the concept of being isolated from other individuals, or even in a family situation where, confined within the home and couldn't get out of the home and had to deal with each other, then the different emergences of those hierophant characteristics denied us that opportunity to feel, or at least placate, that feeling of being our authentic self, of being that love. And that caused us significant mental and emotional manifestations that were there. They were always there. They just were able to be suppressed because we kept changing the scene. We changed the nature of the interaction, the people that were entering, the scenery, whatever it is that was our trigger. We didn't have that opportunity for change, and we were compelled to deal with the intensity of what we were feeling at the time. Depression, for example, is one. I worked with lots of people over the years, and they manifest what they perceive to be, for example, depression, which was a major diagnosed condition that emerged with people during the pandemic. Depression is nothing more than feeling the heaviness of the emotional baggage that they have been carrying for years, and adding to all of the characteristics of depression that psychology has delineated are byproducts of the depression itself. The one common characteristic of everyone that experiences depression is it feels heavy. So you have to ask yourself, what could possibly feel heavy? Okay, what feels heavy is the emotional baggage. As you begin to invert that awareness inside of you and you become aware of that feeling, you've discovered the problem, and then it's just a matter of, well, that's silly. Why am I keeping that and letting that go? I've had numerous people that I've worked with, many of which that have gone on to be excellent meditators, had that awareness, and they were able to let all of that heaviness go. They said, well, that's stupid. Why am I keeping that? And it disappears. I had one woman that's very memorable in my experience. She had suffered from depression for 30 years, and she had paid thousands of dollars to go to all of these retreats for depression. If you come to this depression for 2 weeks and pay us $15,000, then you'll be healed when you get through with this thing. And all the psychologists and therapists were there to help her, and she was no better at the end of it. But she did that over and over and over again for 30 years. she woke up one morning after we did a little bit of work and had conversation. She said, I woke up and I realized, well, this is stupid, and just let it go. And thereafter, she was healed. I didn't do anything. That was her awareness that discovered the problem and offered the solution of letting it go. Certainly, guidance is very helpful. We have even meditation guides. We have therapists that have an acute degree of awareness because they've done the work on themselves that can guide us. But the responsibility of healing is always on us to heal ourselves. Other conditions, traumas, I work primarily, I've focused on working with traumas, and I'm saddened but amused by, the United States military, and they spend billions of dollars on how to treat traumas from soldiers and PTSD and so forth that are major obstacles in their ability to function in society. Traumas go away. PTSD is the behavioral characteristics that result as a result of a trauma. They have no understanding of what a trauma is. Traumas go away, and I do this all day, every day. I clear traumas in 10 minutes. I worked with a woman last night. She had 4 what she perceived to be major traumas. In a matter of 28 minutes, we cleared off 4 of them. And so that allows her to start looking at the behaviors and correcting the behaviors that emerged as a result of her continued retention of these perceived traumas. So mental and emotional is nothing more difficulties is as a result of distorted awareness, lack of guidance, lack of inwardly directing the awareness, which is our healing tool, in order to affect the changes that we want in our life, in our progression along the enlightenment path. Yeah, I've lost you again, Ken. I'm not hearing what you're...
You guys have been listening to Dean and I, and I've been interrupting, if you will, and just reminding you that we're going to provide all of his links and everything for you to get to him. All of his services will be there and so forth, so you can get the counseling and all the different things, because we want to see you on the other side, if you will. We want, he had given us some examples of people for years where they were and based on their perception. And when they got an opportunity to realize from inside, they were able to change that perspective and their perspective, and they began to change their life. And what he does is just produces the questions and the ways, the guides, the stuff to extract what's inside of you. And he's skilled in that arena, and he gave us a bunch of examples as to the outcome as a result of all of that. And so, guys, we want to challenge you to get into your space. And I know, Dean, talk to us about your recent book. I mentioned it, the Enigma of the Consciousness. Talk to us about that and what you saw as you are progressing and moving in your life, and you're learning more and extracting more as you go deeper inside yourself. And you began to notice some things. Talk to us about that piece, those revelations that you got, and in that particular book that you've given to us. And guys, this is available for you guys to get to right now. You can shop at his site and so forth. And I always encourage you to give them as gifts to people that are in need. First of all, yourself, and then others, give them as gifts instead of giving tithes and all those type of stuff. Talk to us about that new project that you just gave birth to, Dean, what it consists of and what you saw and you offered to us.
Well, my most recent book is the Enigma of Consciousness, a spiritual exploration of humanity's relationship to creation. We are on the cusp of a dramatic transformation as a global population. We have struggled for many centuries, and one of the primary obligations of this range of consciousness that we experience is to make a choice, and it's called the choice. And the choice, very simply, is whether you are going to polarize along the service to self path, or whether you are going to polarize along the service to others path. And it is entirely your choice whether you polarize one way or the other. The measure of how you're doing is how you adjudicate the thoughts that you process. Those polarizing along the service to self path are pursuing the path of separation from the one infinite creator. Those choosing to polarize along the service to others path are choosing to pursue unity. The service to others path is considered the direct path to the creator. Those choosing the service to self path are considered the indirect path, because you will perceive yourself to be separate and potentially for billions of years, until such time as you hit a roadblock or a brick wall, because you can't be both in unity and in separation with the one infinite creator. And so you will be tasked at that point of beginning your evolutionary process all over again and learning the path along the service to others path. The book, and that's only one chapter of the book, as a result of my meditation and surrendering my perceptions of separation and establishing communication with my higher self and learning, I was privileged to have about a 10-year period where I was virtually in isolation, that I could study with my higher self and learn. And so consequently, the book is the results of that study period that provides us information on the beginnings of creation, the purpose of creation, the structure of creation, the structure of the archetypical mind that guides all of the processing of thought that we experience, and how it serves to create those distortions of perception that we have been talking about during the course of our conversation. It offers insights on people that we have deemed to be spiritual leaders and significant contributors to our enlightenment, who they were, why they were there, how they got there, and their purpose. It explains the nature of this hierophant and how it serves us. If you understand that part of our processes that we begin from begins in a state of unconsciousness, and that is intentional. The unconsciousness, if you remember, most people, when they were in the 9th grade general science, they did an experiment with a bean pod, and you planted one bean pod in darkness and one in sunlight, and they both grew. The one in sunlight grew more slowly, but it grew in a healthy fashion. The pod that was planted in darkness grew much faster than the one that was planted in sunlight, but it was not healthy. It had no chlorophyll. It wasn't producing a healthy plant, but it grew more quickly. And so the unconsciousness serves us because we are like that pod that is planted in darkness that grows more quickly until it's searching for the sun, searching for the sunlight, until we reach that sunlight, and then we become healthy because we begin to function with chlorophyll and the things that are necessary for us in order to be a healthy individual. And so that is part of our design, that we will be planted in darkness so that we will grow more quickly and emerge into sunlight and become the healthy plant, the healthy individual that we are. But it explains things of that nature and why the nature of our experience as it is, and what we can look forward to in the next years as we assume responsibility for our own development and progression through the evolutionary process.
Dean, this has been a good one, man. I actually just wanted you to let it all out and just giving it to us, because their information, your data was so precise and on that I wanted everyone to be able to just drink it all up and not to be interrupted. But sometimes when you're eating a good meal, the interruptions can be, as they say, a pain in the ass. But I want to thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment and offering your time and your wisdom, your knowledge, your insights that you gain through your journey, and afford us an opportunity to become even more enlightened about who we are. And all of you guys who are listening to us, we're going to provide that for you so that you can have access to Dean and his books, get into his services and so forth, his counseling, whatever you need. Those of you that have a need, here is an individual who has presented that is able and capable of assisting you to get through to the other side. Dean, thank you so much for coming to the Threads of Enlightenment.
It's been delightful, Ken. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, sir.